What's going on, world? Welcome to my podcast. It's just different with Ty. Make sure you like and subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell. I am here in Albany, New York with, to me, probably is one of the, if not the greatest, yes, and I'm giving her that title, greatest activist, revolutionary of all time, Miss, or I should say, Dr. Miss Alice Green, and we're gonna talk about her life, and we're gonna talk about her book right here, Who We Believe in: Freedom, Activism, and the Struggle for Social Justice. And she just released a new book called The Outsiders: Growing Up Growing Up Black in the Adirondacks. So, without further ado, Dr. Green, how are you?
I'm fine. Thank you for that incredible introduction.
Well, you deserve it, plus and some, you know. So we're gonna be. I'm gonna ask you a lot of questions again out of your book, things that I didn't know, things that probably some people probably knew, but a lot of people didn't know. So we're gonna dive right into it, and we're gonna start off with tell the world who you are.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I'm still learning who I am, by the way. I did grow up in the Adirondacks, which was basically a white rural community. And so there were very few people of color. I learned very little about who I was as an African American. So I had to spend a lot of time fighting out who I really am. But it was interesting growing up in the Adirondacks because my family was there. They had migrated from the South, and there were a few other black people in another town. So we had to figure out how do we survive in that kind of community. My dad had left the South because of Jim Crow discrimination. He feared the criminal justice system, which was at that time basically taking black men and women off the streets and putting them into this convict leasing system, which allowed businesses to rent people to do work for them without any kind of payment. So it sort of brought back slavery in a slightly different form. And my dad wanted to escape that. He wanted to have a family that grew up in an area that felt that they were at least free. So he migrated with a number of other black people from the South during that period, from the 20s to the 70s. And so we left the South, which means that I did not have an opportunity to know my extended family, didn't know my grandmothers, my uncles, my aunts, any of those people. And so we were in sort of a closed community, depending upon each other because we were black, but finding that the world out there that my father thought he was escaping wasn't really and totally escaping because racism in the North was much more subtle. And you had to deal with that. There was discrimination, everywhere you went. People had not seen or known people of color, so you had to deal with their reaction to you. And so it made you feel inferior. We grew up in an atmosphere of white supremacy and fearing people who did not know us or understand us. So it was a challenge, but there were good people there too as well. The school system was good. And my mother especially wanted to make sure that we got treated equally. She wanted to make sure that we got a good education because education was considered the way to survive and excel in this community, this society, because in the South, education was not offered to people of color following the Civil War to any great extent. So my dad was illiterate, and she wanted to make sure that we got a good education. So I latched on to education as a way of perhaps finding out who I was and to get some kind of freedom and to feel good about myself. So I think that's sort of where where I am, how I got situated, and
Okay.
the beginnings of who I am.
Okay. Okay. Well, you talk about your mother, and in your book, you said your mother had the greatest impact on your life. Why was that?
Yeah, mothers are great people, first of all, and I think we all recognize that. But she devoted her entire life to making sure her children were safe and protected, that they were able to eat, that they were clothed. And that was not an easy task, considering the fact that we were in poverty. My dad, who worked in the iron ore mines in the area, unfortunately had an accident. The trolley car ran over him, so he was not able to go back and work in the mines. He worked on top, which is it was a very low salary. So my mother had to take care of her husband for a long period of time, and she had to take care of 6 children and figure out how to feed and nurture them. And she was incredible. She was a very compassionate woman, and she, as I said, spent her entire life trying to make life as positive, I should say, as she could. So she was definitely a major influence in my life. She did everything that she could to help us. She was there at the school to make sure teachers were treating us correctly. She kept interest in how we were being educated. She worked outside the home whenever she could. And those opportunities did not come often. She had to figure out how to feed 6 children, and in a very difficult living situation. Rural poverty is very different than poverty in the urban community. There aren't the services that you might find in an urban community. So she had to bear a lot for her children and her family. So I can't say enough about how wonderful she was and what she gave to us as a family.
So, we know you now as I was saying in the beginning, as someone who dedicated their whole life and, speaking out and fighting against injustice and how our community has lack of access to a lot of different things. But what I want to know is, at what point in your life did you say, hey, there's something wrong here with a group of people who's being oppressed and denied a lot of equality and denied a lot of different things? I could revert back to a time, as I read in your book, when you, I believe, 14 or 15 years old, you said something happened to you, and from that point, that's when you knew, okay, you want to dedicate your life to becoming an activist. So can you talk about that?
Yeah, I think it happened rather early with me. When you're in a white society that is ruled by white supremacy, because you're always taught that white people are superior and black people aren't, you start to believe it. And so that is very dangerous, I think. But you start to believe that there's something's wrong with you. But on the other hand, you know how discrimination makes you feel. And when I was about 15, I had an experience in the area, near the area where I grew up, a white friend of mine and I got a job at a motel restaurant in Paradox Lake, New York. And I was very close to that friend of mine. We basically grown up together because she lived, 2 doors from me. And so we experienced this racism that I knew about but hadn't really known how devastating it can be to your psyche. So we got this position at this motel restaurant, and the owner happened to be from Florida, and she each summer brought with her her staff of black people. There was a cook and his wife and another young man. She brought them with her every year to work for her. But I didn't realize what was happening until I got there, and she decided that she would show us where our living quarters were. And she showed my friend Myrtle where she would be staying, and she would be staying in their private house. And that was very luxurious. All the other white help stayed in other structures on the property that were very decent. And when she showed me where I would be staying, even though I objected because I wanted to room with my friend, she showed me where the black people lived. And they were working when I was shown where I would live, and it was in a barn in the back of the building. And I mean a real barn. Animals had lived there, had no walls and or furniture to speak of. There was a cot, and when I got into the cot, I was really kind of confused about what was going on here. Black people were living in the barn, and the white people were living in decent housing. So I couldn't sleep, and soon I learned that what was happening in that barn was that it was also occupied by bats, which scared the living daylights out of me. And I was alone, and I think I probably cried most of the night and felt something was wrong here. So my mother had, told me that she really wanted me to have a position to work and to earn some monies, because she couldn't afford to, pay for clothing and other essentials. So I knew that I should work there and stay there for the summer. But this situation bothered me so much that I decided that it was harmful for me to stay there. And so the next day I confronted the owner and told her how I felt, and questioned her. And before that, I had talked to the couple that from the South, the black couple from the South, and about how they felt about living in a barn, and the white people were in other kinds of housing. And so they said something to me that stuck with me. They said that that's just the way it is. And that bothered me. So when I was talking to the owner, I mentioned that she was treating black people differently, and I didn't understand it. And I said, I can't live with bats and to be treated like that. So she said, well, you're fired. And my retort was, you can't fire me because I already quit, especially in my mind. And so my friend was also present, and she decided that she would leave, and I knew that I was going to leave, obviously. And so we packed our things up and hit the road. However, we were 40 miles from our home, and we had no transportation, no way to connect with our family, and we walked. And I realized that I felt good about doing that, even though I know my mother would not understand or at least be upset. I knew that I had done something that made me feel good about myself. So I left with my respect and, for myself, and my dignity was still intact. And so that had a great impression on me in terms of the work that I now do and that I prepared myself to do, because I wanted to work to, in some way, I wasn't sure how, to make sure that black people were not treated the way I was treated, and that other black people were treated because of racism. So my life has been devoted to doing that. I've started out in education, in an urban setting, working with kids of color in Rochester. I've been a social worker, working again in youth and family services to help kids of color. And my doctorate is in criminal justice. And criminal justice is one of the major oppressive forces in our society. And I looked at how black people are disproportionately incarcerated and brutalized by the system. So my life has been an exercise in trying to make whatever changes I could so that all people are treated with dignity and treated equally. So that guides me still to this day.
Amazing. You keep going. I ain't gonna interrupt. Thank you for that. There's something I wanted to ask. I've asked a few people about a certain time, and where were you? What were you thinking about? And you actually talk about it in your book. I think you said, correct me if I'm wrong, I think you was going to see your brother. You was talking about the time of Dr. Martin Luther King and when you heard about him being assassinated. And that was an event for you, in a sense. Can you talk about that, please? And,
Oh, yeah. Yeah, my brother is also in education. He started out in education. And he was in school in Washington, D.C. I had never been to Washington, and I had heard about the cherry blossoms. I was still a graduate student. Heard about the cherry blossoms. So I used this as an opportunity to get to Washington, encouraged my brother to invite me, which he did. And I stopped in New York overnight, went by bus from Albany, and I was at a hotel, and the news came on that Martin Luther King had been assassinated. And that was really a blow to me. But the next day I continued on my way to Washington, D.C., and didn't hear any more about what was going on. But when the bus approached Washington, I noticed something was going on. It was a lot of smog, and it looked, I couldn't figure out exactly what it was, but it was extremely cloudy. And and nobody told me what was going on. So when I got off the bus, luckily my brother was there, and he explained to me that there was some upheaval going on in Washington D.C. as a result of Martin Luther King's assassination. So there was all kinds of things going on. It was there were fires, and there were people were closing their businesses, and there were armed people. There were all kinds of military people there with all kinds of equipment. And when I realized what was happening, I wanted to be there because I understood that people. I didn't call it a riot. It was people were responding to not only Martin Luther King's death, but responding to the treatment of black people, and also I think everybody realized that there was also some backlash regarding the Civil Rights Movement, the 1964 Civil Rights Act, and 1965 Voting Rights Act. Whenever blacks have progressed in any way, we see a reaction, a backlash from many in our society. So I understood that, and I, listened to people. And luckily, my brother was very kind. He allowed me to get in the middle of this so I could listen to people. I need to know what they were saying and what they were thinking, and what this whole thing of the assassination meant to them. So it was a very educational experience for me, and I felt somewhat connected and involved with what was going on, because people were reacting to, as I said, not only Martin Luther King's death, but to oppression, racism, and all kinds of issues related to that, poor housing, poor unemployment opportunities, all of those things. And I heard people talking about who owned their community. That was the thing that impressed me the most. They realized that their community was owned by someone else. The stores were owned by someone. And I mean, there were some black businesses, but that's why they put the signs up saying we're a black business. But people were reacting to all those other people who basically owned their community. So it taught me that one of the ways to some freedom is to own your community. That other people can't own your community and work for your freedom and equity. So that has always stayed with me as well. So that's why I'm very supportive of people of color owning their community. And we've tried to help people do that, especially housing. My husband does home ownership and housing. We're sort of partners to try to make sure that people have own something, whether it's education, housing, do work on health care, all of those kinds of things. So I learned, during events and happenings in the community about how people are affected by some of these oppressive forces, which helps you when you start thinking about how you're going to work to bring about change.
You just raised another question that just popped up in my mind. And I'm happy you brought it up. You talk about owning, how important that is. And I believe that as well. You control, your community by owning. What do you say to some of the people that are out there that feel that has this notion that black people don't want to own nothing? Black people, they're comfortable with their conditions of having less than, and black people are lazy and they don't want to achieve or aspire to do anything. Look at the people that come from Central America. They come over here and within 3 years they own a home and they got a business and they got this and that and they got their own communities. And you know, it's not the system. It's just black people are just conditioned to not wanting to want to do better. What do you say to that?
Well, first of all, African Americans did not freely come here. They were brought here. They were stolen, and they came to this country. We can never underestimate the impact that the period of enslavement had on people, on African Americans. We grew up believing that, and all these stereotypes, I think, that we have today come out of that period, that you know, black people needed white people to survive, that you know, they didn't have any know-how about doing anything. We're now finding that a lot of the people who were brought here in this country had skills. They could build things, you know, they could grow things. They had a lot of skills, and that's why one of the reasons why they were valuable. So we, you know, own people as we would any kind of product, whether it was cattle or whatever. Black people were owned by someone, and an economic system was built to maintain that ownership of black people. This, you know, not only it promotes the stereotypes, you have to, I think white people had to somehow or other try to justify the way that they treated black people whose labor was stolen. They stole the labor. And they had to rationalize that it was okay to do these things, you know, to separate families and children and all of that, because black people didn't know any. They didn't, you know, they didn't have the intelligence. There was something wrong with them. And so to justify the treatment of them as slaves, you have to develop these stereotypes about black people. And even though blacks did all the work, they were stereotyped as lazy. You know, when for whatever reason, and we did all the work, so that always escapes me. That they were ignorant. Yeah, they didn't have education, that's for sure, because they weren't allowed to. You couldn't, legally, you could not get educated. You could not learn to read and write. It was forbidden. It was forbidden to learn how to ride a horse or swim, because those are ways that people would seek out their freedom. So all of these stereotypes, you know, came into play, and it's the one that I probably is very dangerous and damaging still, is that black people are happy. So that one, I think, was, as I said, was extremely destructive. How could you be happy when somebody else owns you? But the myth grew up. They used media to promote that kind of myth about black people. And so we're still, you know, under the influence and affected by that period of enslavement in terms of who we are, and the stereotypes that grew up around it to justify the terrible treatment of Africans. And so all of that didn't disappear at any one time. But that's the way you control people. You control people through stereotypes. to a great extent. And so any of those stereotypes that we now use, you know, and the practices and a lot of it grew out of that period of enslavement. You know, sometimes our families are split, but during period of enslavement, children were taken from their parents and sold. They were enslaved as their mothers were. So, you know, they weren't allowed, many were not allowed to marry. So all of those things still have an impact on our lives, you know. So this country never really wanted to get rid of the enslavement. It was an economic system that benefited so many people. So they didn't want to get rid of it. So what has happened is we found ways to continue it in a different form, and incarceration is one of those ways. We found so many different ways to continue to basically enslave people. I'm from the Adirondacks, where there are a number of prisons, and I've worked on this issue for a long time, and try to get people to understand that enslavement and incarceration look a whole lot alike. I don't see any difference. If you go up to the Adirondacks, as I said, you'll find all these people who are incarcerated. They are kept by white people. Their labor is exploited. We pay them little or nothing for doing all kinds of work. They are taken out to help communities. You know, they paint buildings, take care of cemeteries, do all streets and all of those kinds of things without being properly paid for their services. We have a system of incarceration that separates families, much the way that it did during enslavement. So it looked a whole lot alike to me, and I can't figure out how you could talk about one without the other.
What happened, right?
That.
Governor Pataki, Peekskill native like myself. Oh, God, makes me feel embarrassed. What's the situation that surrounded, the whole Alan Green's just a black woman,
Oh, yeah. That's crazy black woman.
Yeah. Oh, she said crazy? I thought she said
What?
mad black
Something.
woman. Yeah.
I forgot what she called me.
Yeah, I think she said something about a mad black woman or something like that.
Yeah, something like that. I forgot exactly.
So, one of the things that's mentioned in your book a lot, and maybe a lot of people don't know, is about Trinity Institution. Can you explain what that is to the people listening, and your role, your part into that?
Mm-hmm. Right. As I said, I started out in education, and being in the classroom was nice and exciting, but I felt that I needed to know more about my students. Where did they live? Where did they come from? What were their lives like? And so while I was teaching, I was very much involved in the life of my students, and I thought that was really important. And so then I went into social work. I got an MSW for social work, and was able to get a job at Trinity Institution, which is for the Youth and Family Services Center in Albany. It was previously a settlement house, basically providing services to immigrant populations. But it was located in the south end of Albany, which was increasingly black. People during the Great Migration were moving into Albany and coming through the south end, which is where the Trinity Institution was located. So I was able to get a position there as a group worker, which allowed me to work with young people in the community. I worked in housing projects with young people, setting up programs, doing a whole bunch of things that I thought were important for our young people to know about, some skills that they needed to develop. And so I took them on trips. I did a whole bunch of things to educate them and to also work with them and their families to try to address some of their needs. Trinity, fortunately, was able to get a grant as part of the anti-poverty program during the 60s. And so it got involved in doing community organizing. And the whole idea was to involve people in the community to help, develop programs and services because they were the impacted people and they knew what they needed better than anybody else. So did a lot of community organizing, which means that you have to address some of the policy issues in a community that affect people, like welfare rights. We started welfare rights groups, and we also organized voting rights kinds of activities. Albany is a machine-controlled city. It was the Democratic Party controlled everything, and the housing that they got, the jobs that they got, everything was controlled by the city, and so black people were not able to get into the good housing and good positions. So we sort of took on the administration in terms of trying to promote change in the way that they were treating people of color. And so Trinity played a major role in developing community organizations that became active. There was a group called the Brothers, which became very well known in the community. They organized themselves to get jobs, to break the unions that were not hiring black people. They also promoted, education about voting, and so there's a lot of things going on there. I decided to, in order to really get the community addressing a lot of these issues, that there should be some way of communicating better than what we were doing. So I started a newspaper called The Voice. It started out as the South End Voice, but then it was changed to bring in other people. But it was Voice of the South End. And so that caused a lot of people to, start organizing around various issues to improve the community. And so Trinity played a major role in that. It's now still a family and youth services. They have a lot more money and a lot more programming than they did when we first started it. But Trinity Institution, played a major role in development of people politically, and also involving them in the life of the community in a very, very constructive kind of way. So I'm very proud of the work that I did with Trinity, and happy to see that it's developed into a well-financed, active service in the community.
In your book, and I'm going to go to it again, Who We Believe in Freedom, Activism, and the Struggle for Social Justice, I'm going to talk about something that's probably a touchy, personal topic. I'm going to say these names as well as other names later on, and I want you to explain to me who they are, what happened, and etc. Dante Ivy, Nam Cream Moore, and Raymond Stallings.
Those were all black men who were either brutalized or killed by Albany police. We even started doing work to change the criminal justice system at Trinity, as a matter of fact, because the first thing I learned when I arrived in Albany was that black people feared the police. They were brutalized by police and had been for a number of years. And so, it was important for us to work with the population, and I did work with the NAACP and the Civil Liberties Union to try to address some of those problems that we saw in policing. We thought there needed to be a review board. We protested whenever there was any kind of police action that brutalized people. And so those three names that you mentioned were young black men who, as I said, were brutalized. Dante was a young man who had some mental health issues. And the police department had identified the area that he lived as a hot spot, which meant that there was increased surveillance of that community, so that when Dante was simply walking home and putting his arm up his sleeve to stay warm in a 30-degree weather, police interpreted that as having a gun. And so he was stopped for absolutely no reason. And I think he was tased, and he died as a result. Nakreen Moore was in the South End, and the police at one point had chased his car, believing that he had a gun. And the car was stopped in the South End, and there were no videotapes going at the time, camcorders that were not functioning. So we don't know exactly what happened, but the police did shoot him, and no one can explain why. So that was another case that I think the community came together on, or upset about the killing of this young man without any real explanation of why. You also mentioned
Raymond Stallings.
Raymond Stallings.
Yes.
Raymond Stallings was a young father who went to the suburbs to one of the stores to purchase a cake for his wife's birthday. And when he left the store, for some reason, and this was during Rodney King time, when a lot of black males were really fearful of police, increasingly because of what had happened to Rodney King being beaten in California by police, and that was caught on tape. So anyway, Raymond Stallings proceeded to go back to Albany, and he noticed that there were police following him, and he didn't understand why. And I think that he probably was very fearful, as I said, because of Rodney King, what had happened to Rodney King. And then when he entered the city of Albany, he saw that he was being followed by Albany police on the highway, and he wasn't speeding or anything. They were just following him, and we didn't know why. So he got very frightened, and he jumped out of his car and he ran across the field because he was afraid. And while he was running, he had a heart attack and dropped dead. The police department never notified his family of his death. They learned about it on the evening news, which we thought was absolutely outrageous. But it gives you some idea of some of the history of blacks being treated differently in the city of Albany by a police department, and why there's such great fear of the department, and why the relationships are so bad, I think, in the city of Albany between the black community and the police department. And it's something that we've been trying to work on for a long time.
And how, you said something you've been trying to work in for a long time. Now, how has that been working? Do you feel like there's some type of progress now, since I'm sure the management possibly maybe have changed as far as who the police chief is and who the mayor is, and is this some type of progress, or it's still, you know?
I think we've been working on this issue for a long time, and we started out, as I mentioned, trying to get a review board so that the community could be involved in examining any kind of complaints with the police. We've worked to try to improve the relationships. We've promoted community policing, which is a philosophy that guides the relationship between the community and the police. An equal relationship between the police and community, to identify issues and to work to solve problems that they see in the community. So, so we've served on different boards to try to make that kind of improvement. There have been some police chiefs that were very happy to work with us and were very effective. We have recently, in the last 6 years, developed a LEAD program, which is Law Enforcement Assisted Diversion Program, which allows people who come in contact with the police to be diverted rather than incarcerated. And so I think that's been helpful. However, it doesn't go far enough. Our ultimate goal is to affect mass incarceration, to reduce mass incarceration, and also to have zero youth detention. So we're still working on those kinds of issues, but yeah, it's gotten somewhat better. Whenever there is a claim of brutality, the community is very sensitive to that, and they try to do whatever they can to raise the consciousness of other people. The review board now has more power and some resources to investigate claims of police brutality and mistreatment. So yes, there's been some improvement, but we haven't gotten nearly far enough in addressing that problem.
So I'm going to read something off to you, a few pages from your book. And it said, it says in there, Governor Mario Cuomo spoke at the 1982 SUNY Albany graduation when I received my PhD in criminal justice. He would soon ask me to join his administration, which I did after working for the New York Civil Liberties Union, managing its Albany office. While there, I also took on the task of serving as a chairperson for the local NAACP Legal Redress Committee. While heading these two programs, I was in the thick of most of the criminal justice, legal, civil and legal rights and race-related issues of that time. Soon I added to my agenda issues relating to the state prison operating and its impact on the imprisoned, their families, and communities. Sounds like a lot.
Was a lot.
So my question to you would be, and I commend you for this definitely, for taking on all of this, things, needed issues and things that needs to be addressed. But I want to say for you, how does one commit 100% to all of these different titles, different situations, all these different hats you got to wear. And maybe personal to ask, did that take away from your personal time with family where you had to give up, all right, can't do this with the family because this is going on over here or this is going on over there, and did the dynamics of that as well, and still your own mental health where you just wanted to have your own downtime? Did you have your own downtime? I know it's a lot of questions, but I just read that and I found that to be truly something where I say, how do someone can manage all these different things all at once?
Well, that is a difficult question, but I've never forgotten the fact that my great-grandmother was born enslaved. She raised my mother, and the thought, and this is also goes back to my first employment situation, that how black people are treated in this country, and just the thought that we were considered property weighs very heavily on me, and that I think about all the people who came before me, excuse me, who worked to get rid of enslavement and to promote civil rights in our country. I mean, there's some incredible people who did some wonderful, wonderful things to promote freedom. And, we have some freedom today because of the people who came before us.
Correct.
They did so much, and very dangerous. I mean, even during the civil rights movement, when you think about it, Martin Luther King and his house, being bombed, and so many people being killed during the civil rights movement. Young people willing to go to jail, and so there's so much we've had to do to work for our real freedom. That's always a part of my thinking and feeling. That no one's going to give us our freedom. We have to make sure that it happens, and so that's why you devote your life to doing that. Because, I have a son, but I don't want my son to be in a situation where he can't live somewhere or he can't get a certain job because he's black. So I might have a son, but I also have a responsibility to make sure that those horrible forces that are out there to deny him that freedom get dealt with. And so I do whatever I can. I don't consider it to be anything close to what some of the other people have done throughout our history to work for our freedom. But I do have a responsibility to know what that is and to do whatever I can. So it's not even separating family, because it's involving in many ways my thoughts about how they're going to be treated in this society. And so luckily I've been able to take care of my family and my children and grandchildren. I took care of grandchildren and have taken them to court with me, and to make sure that I was there when I need to be there.
Correct.
So I've always, managed to do everything that I need to do for family. Lucky to have a husband who's supportive and concerned about the same issues that I am. We work in different fields, but we're partners in terms of trying to remove those oppressive forces that control our lives. And so it's never, I don't think I neglected anything in terms of a family. I wished I had known more about the history of black people so that I could have taught, the children more about it. But, growing up where I grew up, I didn't have that opportunity. But the thought that there are still people enslaved, particularly people who are incarcerated, just wears me down. I can't stand that thought of separating families, of putting people in behind bars. Is there something inhumane about that? And so it bothers me. So when something bothers me, I have to work on it. So I've never thought that I had to neglect the family, but I do have a responsibility to work towards black freedom in this country, which is not, we haven't achieved yet. So, I sometimes took kids with me. I've gotten my grandchildren involved in protests, at various times. So it's, I've spent a lot of time going to prisons, an awful lot of time going to prison, but I felt it was important to do, and I got so much from it. It's not that I'm giving out always. It's that I'm getting something from it. I have been educated in a way that nobody else could have been educated by developing relationships and working with incarcerated people. Some of the most intelligent and creative people that I've had the pleasure of being involved with are people who were incarcerated. I mentioned Eddie Ellis. Eddie Ellis was unbelievable. He taught me about the criminal justice system. I got a doctorate in criminal justice, but I didn't feel like I was really educated until I met Eddie Ellis, Larry White, and those people who were incarcerated who taught me about how the system actually works. They taught me about racism in a way that I never really knew. They taught me about the FBI and what they did during the 60s and the Black Panthers, and how many of them were incarcerated because the FBI thought they were a threat to this country. And the inequities in the criminal justice system, they taught me all of that. They did research that that we're still using to do our work. Even the governor at one point, Governor Cuomo did, Mario, had borrowed some of the language from Eddie Ellis and their research about who was incarcerated. Why do we have a disproportionate incarceration? Why is the prison system continues? And the economic basis of all of that. How the drug war almost destroyed urban black communities. All of that I learned from incarcerated people. So I'm, indebted to them. I got a lot by being involved, and I'm just very happy that I've had that opportunity. So I've done a lot of work with incarcerated people because I see them as enslaved people.
Now, Dr. Green, one of as I'm sure all of them had an impact on you in some kind of way. You talk about particularly the killing of one Jesse Davis. Can you talk about that, please, and let the world know who Jesse Davis is?
Yeah. Yes. The Jesse Davis case had a major impact on not only me, but the entire community. Jesse Davis was a young African-American man who had some mental health issues as well. He lived in Arbor Hill, one of the black neighborhoods in the city of Albany. When there was a little bit of gentrification going on, and one of the white people who moved into the area was not aware of who Jesse was. The police knew who Jesse was. They knew he had mental health issues. And Jesse would make a little bit of noise out in the street, and the police would come along and move him along. But this one new resident in the city called the police and told them that they had to do something about him. So on a Sunday morning, Jesse was out making noise on the street. The police came in force, and they tried to quiet him, and he ran into his apartment, locked the door, and for some reason the police decided to follow him and try to get him to open the door. They shouted obscenities and told Jesse to open the door. Jesse refused to open the door, so the police, and this was about 6 or 7 police officers were on the scene. They went around the building, looked in the window, and they saw Jesse. And for whatever reason, they shot Jesse. And they explained that the reason they killed him is because he was coming at them with a knife and a fork. There was another police officer nearby who rushed to the scene with his camera and took a picture of the dying or dead Jesse Davis. The community became outraged. I was working with the NAACP and the Civil Liberties Union at the time, and we were trying to understand why they shot Jesse Davis, because they knew he had mental health issues. So we organized to protest the shooting and tried to get the district attorney to send to the grand jury because we didn't understand, again, why they shot Jesse, who was in his apartment. The district attorney, the grand jury refused to indict them. But we were not satisfied in the community, so we kept on this case. There was a lawsuit, and during the exploration of materials, we discovered that there was the photograph that had been taken by a police officer in the file in the police department. And the photograph shows Jesse Davis lying in his floor. And what was in his hand was not a knife and a fork, but a toy truck and a keychain. Jesse was mentally handicapped. So he never came at them with a knife and a fork. But the police officers got away with it. They were not charged with Jesse's death. But so the community became even more outraged. And so we tried to work for change, like how you treat people, especially how you treat people with mental health issues. So we were able to get a mobile crisis unit started in the city of Albany. We also asked for the review board. And even though we didn't at that time get a review board, we got a relations board, which had no power, but it allowed us to at least talk to police about these issues. So Jesse Davis case stayed with us, and so the Center for Law and Justice was born out of that incident. We decided that we needed to do something to prevent this from happening again. We needed to change the police department in terms of how they treated particularly people of color and also people with mental health issues. So the Center for Law and Justice got formed for that that reason to start monitoring the police department, to figure out how to work for change in terms of the relationship between the black community and police, and how to change the entire system in terms of how it operates, and particularly in vulnerable communities. So that's how we got started. Jesse Davis's death really started a lot of our advocacy work. The lawsuit took about 10 years. We stayed involved with it by raising funds and other resources to help with the lawsuit. I took the family out to Utica when the trial was scheduled, the lawsuit. And prior to that, the city had offered the family $12,500 to settle the case. I don't usually give advice, but I told the family that they should. I don't think they should take it. That Jesse's life was worth a whole lot more than that, and so they didn't. So it was scheduled to go to trial in Utica. I took his sister and another relative to the trial, and we were waiting for the trial to begin, and then there was a lot of huddling going on. And we finally realized what had happened, that the city decided not to go to trial, and they offered the family $500,000 instead of the $12,500 they had offered a few days before. We wanted the trial. We didn't get the trial, but the next best thing was to at least get more money from the city regarding the lawsuit and the death of Jesse Davis. So it was a win, but also a loss. But it kept the community involved with that case, and we have, gotten people to volunteer and be involved in working for change ever since. And they said that's how the Center for Law and Justice got its start. And so we've been operating ever since 1985. The center of all the major criminal justice issues that have come up in the city and across the state. So, we've always recognized Jesse. We've had events to honor him. But the greatest honor, I think, was that we formed the Center for Law and Justice to work for change in the criminal justice system.
So, thank you for that. And just going off of earlier what you, when I read it off about all the things that you were involved in during that time, and you talked about, the prison system, lobbying and speaking up for the prisoners and everything else, and how did that come about, and what did you see in there to make you say, hey, listen, this is something else, this is another path that I want to go into, because I guess whatever it is, I feel maybe the black prisoners, their voices need to be heard. Like, what made you want to cross over and get into that?
Well, yes, the impetus came from black prisoners. I was invited to come to one of their group meetings at Greenhaven Correctional Facility. That's where I met Eddie Ellis and Larry White. And these young men were involved in really working to make sure that the rest of the community understood the role that the criminal justice system was playing in their communities, how destructive it was. They organized political action committee to reach legislators to get them involved to understand, oh, how the criminal justice system was actually functioning, and and the harm that it was doing to not only them but to their families and communities. So we started working with a number of those who were incarcerated to set up conferences, legislative conferences. We invited particularly the Black and Puerto Rican Caucus to go into the prison. We planned legislative conferences and educational seminars and all of that. We brought other people from the community, invited other people from around the state to come and be a part of these conferences that the incarcerated people were actually organizing inside the prison, particularly Greenhaven. And so the Center for Law and Justice developed a very close relationship with that particular prison and others to to work for change in whatever way we could. Well, the incarcerated people thought it was really important to get the community involved, that their voices were strengthened by having a community and legislators involved in what they were doing. They were doing research about where people were coming from in the system to show that the focus in our society was on urban communities and incarcerating people from those areas and what that impact was. So I can't stress enough the role that incarcerated people played. Voting rights, they had lawsuits meant to try to gain the right of incarcerated people to vote, which I think is a major issue, and we've worked for that for a long time. Haven't achieved it yet, but we're still working on it, trying to get other groups to push for giving incarcerated people the right to vote. Educating the community to know that people who are in jail can vote, because there was a lot of there was a misunderstanding in the community about who could vote and who couldn't. Some people thought that if you'd been incarcerated, you were denied the right to vote for the rest of your life, for instance. And in some states you are. There's permanent disenfranchisement. But in New York State, that's not the case. And if you've not been convicted of a felony and incarcerated, you still have the right to vote. So there are a lot of votes inside the jails, and we've been working to educate people about that. We've been able to work on legislation that gives people who are on release from incarceration or on parole the right to vote. But we still haven't achieved enfranchisement of people who are incarcerated. So it was very important for us to do the work that we did with incarcerated people. And as I said, they gave a lot to us. They educated us in the community about how the system was functioning and its impact, which we're deeply indebted to them for that. So, we continue to work on issues of incarcerated people send us letters and ask for information and help while they're incarcerated. We developed families of incarcerated people that were meeting in our office on a regular basis because they have a whole set of problems and issues as a result of members of their family being incarcerated. So incarceration is a major concern of ours, and it has been and continues to be.
So with that said, fast forward just a little bit. You're visiting the prisoners, right? You all guys are organizing and you're talking, and there's great rapport. Something happens that, to me, I've never seen happen before. I'm not saying never happened before, but with anyone else, but with you, you receive a letter or something like that from the Bureau of the Prisons telling you what, and when you explain, can you also explain what do you think the reason for it as to why you received this letter?
Well, after a while, the system felt that having people come in from the community was not a good idea. They wanted to have more control over these really bright, intelligent people who were raising questions and writing. They did a lot of writing about the prison system. So there was some fear of having people like me go into the prison. So in the year 2000, there was some concern that some of the incarcerated people would engage in a work stoppage inside the prison. So I think the system was really worried about that. And so they wanted fewer people coming in. And at one point, the incarcerated people had written down the grievances that they had, and they asked me, the Center for Law and Justice, to disseminate this document, much like what had happened at Attica when incarcerated people wrote down the grievances that they would like to have addressed. And so we did that. They sent it to us. I didn't write it. They wrote it. They sent it to me. It was not in very good. It was not in very good shape when I got it, and so we just sort of retyped it to distribute it to. They wanted to distribute to their families and the community what their grievances were. Didn't change a word of anything, just retyped it. I had a student retype it for me. As a result, I got blamed for introducing contraband into the prison, which never happened. But all we did was, deliver on the outside the grievances that the incarcerated people had given to us. And so that caused a problem. Attica, I was scheduled to go to Attica. They invited me, and I was preparing to leave for Attica, which is not an easy place to get to. But I received a phone call from the program coordinator, whatever his title was, from Attica, and said that I could not come because they blamed me for starting a riot or something at one of the prisons that I had never been to. And they said that Attica is a conservative organization and that you are a radical, so therefore you can't come, which I thought was really weird. But I was not allowed to go into Attica. But, we continued our work in the community to educate the community about incarceration and how the system functioned, how people depended upon it. And the prison industrial complex was something that we wanted people to know about, that, we incarcerated people because it's a good business. And so I was not very well liked because of that. And then, during that period, 2000, I think a lot of people who were incarcerated felt that, here's a new millennium, and we've been in these prisons for a long time. We want something magical to happen, going forward. And so, I was never involved in organizing anything, but I got a letter from Commissioner Gord, who's commissioner of the Correctional Commission. In his letter, he said that I would no longer be able to visit the prison because I posed a threat to, I think there were 72,000 people in prison at that time, that I posed a threat to their safety, and I posed a threat to the thousands of correctional officers and staff of the prison system, and and they said that I would not be allowed to come back into the prison to visit with groups of prisoners. So I was banned, and I'm still banned from every prison in New York State. I've tried to get back in, but it hasn't happened. After all these years, I'm still banned from New York State prison. But we still work with incarcerated people. They send us letters, and we do whatever we can to provide information and services. So I'm still out.
That is. Well, we gotta write it. We gotta sign a petition and make sure that you come back. Because God forbid you actually, do great things and try to inspire and let prisoners know and connect with them and let them know, hey, let's get you adjusted and get you right and so on, so on. That seems to be a problem for the system. I guess they want them to be, dumbfounded and whatever have you, and think in a negative way and not connect with people that are willing to intellectually, connect with them on a level. But that's that. I can't believe that. I can't believe that. I can't believe that. I'm still mind boggled just thinking about that. But it's funny how you talk about being a troublemaker or whatever have you. That's what that hasn't been the first time that you've been accused of such things.
I found that one really interesting because here I am, I'm 5'2" and weighed about 120 something pounds, and I was considered a threat to
a threat. Yeah.
I have to laugh at that one.
I want to talk about real quick. Then Governor Pataki. He was holding a rally or something like that where you spoke about, you don't. I guess he was for the death penalty. Am I getting that right?
Well, he definitely came in. And you're talking about the one where I told him to move.
And you kind of told him to move. If you could talk about that, along with you in the sense them them basically removing you, in which, I think that was at a later time, but leading to your arrest.
Oh yeah.
So if you could talk about that, because again, I'm from Peekskill, New York, and to hear and see someone who else is from Peekskill again, who's then Governor Pataki. I ain't claiming him, but we just happen to be born in the same city, So let's get that clear,
Yeah.
But if you could talk about that.
They usually go to lunch this time. I was just seeing whether they were. But anyway, let's see.
About the meeting, where you talked to him about stepping aside.
Oh, yes.
Any events leading up to to them.
I worked very closely with the Cuomo administration for a while, as you know, because I had an appointment from them. But Mario Cuomo used to come on Martin Luther King Day. When Martin Luther King Day came into existence, he started coming. Harry Belafonte would come, and there would be a big march from downtown to the Empire State Plaza, because we celebrated Martin Luther King's birthday. And so after Mario left and Pataki came into office, Pataki was brand new and didn't know what was going on. So he tried, and Pataki, I had been against Pataki because he came into office on a death penalty platform. I'm deeply opposed to the death penalty. So I was not happy about that. So he came into office and he tried to take Mario's place. Mario would always come and, as I said, and march with people in the community on Martin Luther King's Day. And so when Pataki came, he took on that role. I guess somebody told him that you're supposed to do that on Martin Luther King's Day. So we were all lined up downtown to get ready for the march. And that's one of those moments when I said, something doesn't look right here. I didn't plan this by any means, but Martin Luther King, Day was very special for us. And so I saw the governor, the new governor, he just come into office, like January 1. Martin Luther King's Day was January 15th. So he was standing there getting ready to march. And I'm standing there watching, and I said, something is not right here. This man came into office on a death penalty platform. Martin Luther King was nonviolent, and death penalty is a violent act, I'm sorry. And so I said, something is wrong with this. And as I said, I had not planned it, but I had to act on something that I saw that I thought was so wrong. So I just stepped off the sidewalk, went up to him and said, Governor, I don't think you should lead this march. You support the death penalty. Martin Luther King was nonviolent. And so he said, are you with the march? I didn't know what he meant by that. Of course I'm with the march. Evidently he misinterpreted it. So he quickly said, oh, okay. Because I told him to move back. He couldn't lead the march. That it was not appropriate for him to lead this march. And he quickly went to the back. And so I and another woman who was in a wheelchair and very active as well, we took over as leaders of the march and marched to the Empire State Plaza where they had the program to celebrate Martin Luther King Day. Some of the newspapers got on me for that.
I read.
They said that I misled the governor. I didn't mislead anybody. He asked me if I was part of the march, and I said, yeah, of course. Are you with? No, he said, are you with the march? And I said, of course. He meant, was I one of the leaders or something, or organizers?
Okay.
I think that's what he meant. He's a lawyer. He should use the proper language. But at any rate, I did it, and he got the message. Some at the Martin Luther King Commission were upset because they felt that I had disrupted the Martin Luther King Day celebration.
Troublemaker.
I was labeled a troublemaker by the people in the Martin Luther King Commission, and other people said I shouldn't have done that to the governor, but I thought I should, and I did.
and I agree with you. I'm riding with you 100%. Definitely. But that did eventually. It led, can you talk about the events where you was at another event? I think it had something to do with Governor Pataki, and it led to your arrest.
Yeah, so what happened, I think, was in the next year. The next year, the governor, I don't think he was in the march, but he was expected to give a talk at the Martin Luther King Day celebration, because the governor's always involved with that. So the trooper, I have a front row seat here, and I decided to take a banner and unfurl it when the governor spoke. I didn't make a sound, not one sound, but the troopers knew I was thinking about something because they kept coming up to me and saying, "Don't you do anything." And, you know, you can't tell somebody not to do it. If you do something, that's a different thing.
Correct.
But you can't tell me not to do something. That's illegal. And so, when the governor got up to speak, I unfurled the banner, said no more prisons. And these about 6, I think they're all black, big state troopers, grabbed me and were carrying me out of the convention center. And I hadn't said a word. I was a silent, you know, I was engaged in a silent protest. All I had was my banner. And so they grabbed me. They were not gentle. They grabbed me, and when they were carrying me out, I said, well, as long as they're carrying me out, I might as well make some noise. And so I said, no more prisons. So I'm screaming, no more prisons. And so they carried me, and there was this hallway leading to outside, and they said, we will take you anywhere you want to go except back into the convention center. So I looked at that police car outside, the stand there waiting for me. And I said to them, if you think I'm going to get into that car with state troopers, you're crazy. There's no way I'm going to do that. And so they realized I wasn't going to do it. So they said, well, then we'll arrest you. I said, well, that's what you'll have to do because I'm not getting in that car. So they manhandled me. My bra came off. Came loose, rather. And so they took me and arrested me. And I went to court. The judge, he actually written his decision. Usually they don't do that in the, city court. So the judge said that I had every right to be there, that I did not disturb the peace, that that the state had violated my constitutional right, my First Amendment constitutional right. That basically I had been kidnapped because I hadn't done anything. So you kidnapped me, and I mean I could have won big time, because I knew I could, and I started a lawsuit, but then it just took up too much of my time and energy and work, and I eventually said, forget it. As long as the judge had written an opinion, that's all I wanted. And the opinion was that the state had violated my constitutional rights, and they had no reason to arrest me. I had done nothing. And one of those troopers was Sidney Poitier's cousin.
Really?
Nephew. Was it nephew? Sidney Poitier's nephew.
Wow.
So it was so funny. But yeah, everybody remembers that. There's people now who, because there's a big crowd, and a lot of the younger people who were there, they said, I was there when I heard this noise and I didn't know what was going on. So anyways, and then the next year, the governor didn't show up. He just sent his lieutenant governor. So I didn't let up. So the lieutenant governor's up there speaking, and I had seen the budget for the prisons. And so while she was speaking, I did interrupt her. I admit that. So she's up there talking.
All right.
She didn't know what to do. So this room was filled with thousands of people, right? And she's doing her little speech thing. This blonde woman. and she's talking. And so I interrupted her. I said, the budget that you're talking about contains all this money to incarcerate people, and I object to it. Something like that. And she just didn't know what to do. So finally she says, well, let me finish my talk, and then you can talk. So I'm not on any agenda, right? So I said, okay. I let her speak. I let her speak, and then I got up and I had the floor, which is what I really wanted. But to talk about the budget and the prison budget, and she actually, I got her to come to my program eventually. She came down and met with the kids and everything.
That's good. That's
Betsy,
good.
yeah, Betsy Ross or whatever her name was. Anyway, I thought it was funny.
It is. It is.
And then, so they laid off me until, the next year. They were ready for me, and so they were going. The police were watching me so closely. They knew I was going to do something, and I had this other guy who was with me, and we were trying. At this point, we were trying to get arrested as a protest, but someone from the governor's office said, "Please don't touch Alice Green. Do not arrest her, please."
Yeah, of course, because they know.
All these state troopers,
They know.
they were getting ready to arrest. And he said, "Don't," he's speaking for the governor, "do not arrest her. Leave her alone." So I said, well.
We tried. Nah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you should hear the guy who was with me talk about it. He thought it was the weirdest thing.
So I want to ask you this, real. As far as I know, someone in your position who is for the community, got decades of service of helping the community, being a voice, being a leader. With this type of this type of line of work, I don't want to call it work, but when you go this path, when you take this path, you know you're up against a lot. And not only emotionally, mentally, financially, spiritually, but also you putting possibly yourself and your potential family at risk because you want to seek change in the system, systemic racism. Have you ever received any death threats?
I used to do whatever they call it for the Times Union, the local newspaper. I used to do a column there, and they allowed me to do whatever I wanted to do. And there were people who had so many problems with me that I would get all of these terrible threats from people, usually white people out in the suburbs or someplace like that. Mm-hmm. That was the most difficult thing, because I just didn't want to listen to. I mean, they would write stuff, and I was given the responsibility of reading it and deciding if I wanted to include any of it in my column. So, but just the, the things that they were saying about black people just so upsetting that I said I did it for a while, and then I said I can't do it any longer. So I gave up on that. I've been, I've I've been in a lot of difficult situations. People think I'm the worst person in the world, and that something wrong with me for doing some of the things that I do. So I mean, I know that happens. Mm-hmm. I got a bad reputation. A lot of people now, I hear from a lot of people who worked in the at the state level and some of those organizations. They tell me, what the leaders thought about me. So I hear all of that. I've gotten a lot of negative stuff, but in terms of actual bodily threat, I haven't. That's not something that I've encountered, but it gets to be. difficult when, well, I don't have a whole lot of problem because I'm so committed to what I do that I know that people might not accept it. They might, try to in some way defame me if they want to, but I'm kind of hard to deal with because I don't.
No, you're not.
Yeah, I'm hard to deal with. No, as an activist, I'm very difficult to deal with because I'm not into money, and so and I, with my organization, I don't accept money except from foundations and from volunteers, donators who want to give me money, but because when you accept money from the government, somebody else controls you.
That's right. Correct.
So my thing is, as long as you can't control me, I can say whatever I want to do. Because one of the first things when I started the center was that, I had some people who were upset with me, don't know how to deal with me. Because with so many people that I know of who are silenced, because one of the first things that happened with the Center for Law and Justice, this one guy who was really against me and what we were doing, wanted to know where we got our money from. That's the way. The first thing they want to know is, where do you get your money from? Who's paying for this? And then they try to cut it off. Okay. So and one person said she must be getting this great salary to do this, And so he went and checked it in. I guess is it the I-9, whatever you can check.
Well, like a FOIA request or something, or.
Well, you can. I'm a nonprofit.
Oh, okay,
so
okay.
The state
so
there are records.
Okay, yes.
It's a 90 form or something like. I forgot what it is. Anyways, you can find out where monies come from a not-for-profit. You're not-for-profit. You're tax exempt.
Yeah.
So the information is available. It's public. It's public information. So he checked out the the center's budget, and where because he was sure I had this huge salary that I was being paid for doing what I was doing, and so he checked out and found out that I don't take any money. I don't have a salary. I never did. And then he couldn't deal with that. He doesn't have a salary. And the budget is low-level budget, So he can't touch me.
Correct.
He can't touch me at all. So I've been able to, occasionally we've gotten a little bit of money from something, but it was not, it was for different purposes. But by and large, I only accept foundation money. And as I said, people who donate, or if we raise money or something like that. So it's difficult to deal with somebody like that, because what are you gonna do?
Yeah, what are you gonna do?
What are you gonna do?
Exactly.
You can't cut off my salary. You can't do this. I can say what I want to say, and so I can curse the mayor out if I want to, I don't curse, but I could if I wanted to.
Yeah,
but,
yes.
I can do whatever I want to do. That's a little bit of freedom that I make sure I have, and I'm just lucky I can do it. Everybody can't do it, and I understand that. People have to make a living; they have to do that. But I'm not into a lot of stuff, so I don't,
Correct.
Long as I have a place to sleep and eat, and I'm fine. I don't need anything else.
Yeah.
So that has been very, very difficult for people to deal with me, or they try to find some things in your past or something like that. I've been a clean liver, so you can't. I haven't done anything that you can exploit. So it makes me difficult. but it allows me to do and say what I want to say. And that's part of the freedom that I seek. And it's only part of it. I want to be treated and thought of as an equal person. That takes a lot more work. And that's why I'm involved with a lot of the stuff that I'm involved with. But control, no, not at all. And even with the media, I mean, see, that's why I started a newspaper, so that you could say
control,
what you wanted
yeah,
to and
yeah.
have control over it. So control, as I let out, I started to talk about black people owning their community, that they have control over their community. That's, for me, that's what it's about. And so, I've been lucky. I mean, every now and then you have somebody, call you nigger or something like that.
Correct.
But, I can handle things like that.
Correct.
But it's people who do the work that I do. It can be exhausting. It can be at times depressing, that you know that no matter what you've done, you haven't done enough, that things haven't changed enough, that there's still so many problems that we have to overcome, that some people are still left out of mainstream society. Right now I think it's at its highest point, because down the road I see terrible things. When this whole democracy is threatened, I think, right now. And if Trump gets elected, I mean, this man should not be running any kind of government. And if this country elects that man to run this country after all that he's done, then there's no hope. The democracy goes out the window. You can win an election and deny it and disregard it. That's the basis of a democracy. And so, and I think it's threatened, seriously threatened. I think that this country, generally speaking, hates black people and other groups. They hate them. They still believe that they're inferior.
Absolutely.
And a lot of people, don't want to hear about the terrible history that black people had to experience in this country. They don't want to hear that. I mean, you have people like DeSantis denying the history of black people. Come on. All kinds of terrible things like that. And people buying into it. They don't, truth doesn't matter at all. And so that's what is scary. That's scary. And I fear, I think I'm probably the only person who does this, but I think we're almost at the point of leading to another civil war kind of thing, because there's so many people who are strongly opposed to people who are different, people of color, people of different sexual orientation. There's people who are so strongly opposed to those people, and that can only lead to to something like a civil war. We're divided in such a way that it's going to be hard to bring people together. And I think Trump is the most threatening force in our society. I just hope, I'm hoping that this society does not do the wrong thing and put him back into office, because we're doomed. I mean, that's what I believe. When I see what's happening, with the hate of black people and other people. I just don't see how we can survive it without something like a civil war type thing. You know, there are two opposing forces in this country, and something's got to give.
Absolutely.
You know, but I think people of color are now in a place where they're willing to fight for their freedom. You know, not going to go down without fighting for it. So that means a clash somewhere in there. But when you look at the federal government and what's happening there, and the Supreme Court and all of that, making these terrible decisions, destroying affirmative action, all of these things that we thought were a movement in the right direction are now being destroyed. And so I'm feeling very depressed about what the future might hold for our young people. It's not going to be easy. Not going to be easy.
So I'm gonna ask just a couple more questions.
See, they went on break.
Yeah, they went on break. As I look around at the wall in your beautiful home that you welcome us to, thank you, I appreciate that. I see a picture with you and then President Barack Obama. What was that like? How did that come about with you going to look like it's in the White House, right? Correct? Yeah, it looks like it's in the White House. And you met then President Barack Obama. What was that like?
Oh, well, I was very fortunate. I mean, I was happy that, I was, went to the inauguration stuff and all that and down in Washington, and just absolutely elated when he was elected president. I was sort of hopeful that things could change and that people, this country had changed to some extent. But it was a great event, running into people, and the excitement and energy that was there was just so wonderful. So it was really great, and I had worked to support his election. So I did get an invitation to the White House. I think that picture, maybe the first one, and that was for me, was really exciting to be able to meet him and Michelle. They're both incredible people, and it sort of led to some other things. It led to getting an invitation to the Christmas parties every year.
Okay.
Which is nice, which was fun,
Yeah.
So I did that, but it also led to being invited to some other things, and particularly the one that I got invited to someone's home apartment in New York City. He was there, and they were going to have told me it was a round table. So I was, I said, "Oh, round table! I like to go there." Because it was just as Obamacare was coming into being, and so I got to spend some time with him in somebody's apartment, and he allowed us to ask questions. So, of course, I was the first one to ask him questions.
All right.
I'm pushy that way.
Okay.
So I asked him a question about Obamacare and what does this mean for incarcerated people and people who are coming back into the community. So I think he spent about 20 minutes answering my question, which I was kind of shocked at. But he's very bright, and he pulled all these things out of the air. He knew all the statistics and everything like that. I was just really impressed with him. So that was nice. And so we had that great discussion. And then I got invited to the Waldorf Astoria for a celebration of the United Nations. I can't remember which one it was. And so he saw me there. And, he greeted me. And I think I told you I decided that I needed a big hug from him. So as he was trying to get out of that room and probably go to bed, I hollered after him. I said, Mr. President, can I ask you a question? And so he came back and said, he says, I remember we had a great conversation, at this apartment in New York City. And so I just said, can I have a big hug? So he just gave me this incredible hug. It was so special. I really enjoyed that. So yes, that was great because over the period of him being in the White House, I was able to go there a number of times, and to I've met Michelle separately. She's really so personable. They're both very personable, that I was just so impressed with who they were and how they carry themselves and how wonderful they are. So that was certainly a great time for me.
Okay.
Yeah. Last time I was there, I stayed. I didn't want to leave because I had a feeling I would never get another invitation back.
Yeah. Well, if you get another invitation, just happen he do something, you call me. I want to go. I want to be there.
Because I knew Trump was coming. I said, I know I'm not going to be there.
Correct. Okay. So I'm gonna ask you this. Last question, and answer it however you want to answer it. When it's all said and done, right? When the the smoke is clear. What do you want your legacy to be? What do you want to be known for?
I guess I do things because I care about people, and my legacy is that I'm a compassionate person, and that I value all human life. And so once you have that, you do all that you can to try to solve problems as you can. I mean, it's massive. I understand that, but it's so important for me for people to be free, to be treated equitably, and my compassion demands that. So I do what I'm compelled to do what I do. So I don't have any other explanation. People ask me all the time, well, why don't you do this? Why don't you, now that you've done all this work, why don't you go off to the, this trip and have a grand time and enjoy yourself? I get asked that all the time. Why don't you do that? But no, I'm compelled, and it comes because I'm black, that I'm from Africa, that that my people experienced enslavement that did so much damage to them, and we haven't recovered from it. So it's not even a choice. I don't even see it as a choice. I'm compelled. I'm compelled to work for my freedom and the freedom of all people, not just black people, but I think all people need to be valued and treated equitably. Your color, your ethnicity, none of that should decide how much you can be a part of this society, So I would say I do what I do because I'm compelled, and always have been.
And we definitely salute you for that. And you know, I know I said that was the last question, but this is the last question. Okay, this is the last question. What advice would you give to a young woman, you know, that you know, especially a young black girl that's looking to come up in the ranks or see you as, you know, a role model and wants to follow your path? What advice would you give to her?
Well, try to know who you are, first of all. Try to know who you are. And, you know, if you're going to try to work for your freedom, you got to do whatever it takes to um, not be owned. I still come out of the enslavement thing. Don't let anybody own you. And that could mean so many different things for so many different people. You have to know what you're willing to accept. But if you feel that somebody is pulling your strings, you try to avoid that as much as you possibly can. I mean, I understand there are things that people have to do to survive in this society. I understand that. You have to you have to be employed. You have to do whatever it takes to survive. You know, I understand that, and so I'm not critical in any way of that. But I'm saying you can still do that, but not feel that you are totally owned by somebody. You know, examine it and say, hey, I'm doing this because I need to do it for whatever reason. I have to take care of myself. I have to take care of my family. I have to live. That is okay. But when it comes down to, you know, doing what I think is important, it's important to feel that you in here own you.
Correct.
I don't want somebody else to own me. I want me to own me. So if I make a decision that I want to do this, that's fine. But that's me owning me. And it's hard to get to that point sometimes, but I think it has to happen if you want to have that freedom that I'm talking about. You know, and to as I mentioned in the book, I always speak truth to power. I don't know where it leads, what it takes from me or anything like that, but I tell whoever it is, I don't care if it's the governor, I don't care if it's the mayor, I don't care who they are. If you ask me a question, I'm going to tell you the truth. From what I see, it might not be true, but if I think it's true, I'm going to tell you what I think. And so that's gotten me into a lot of trouble. But at the same time, with all of this, you know, people are unsure how to take me sometimes, but we've earned the respect. They might not like me, but they have to respect me because I'm going to tell them the truth and they know it. And I have an official in the city of Albany who basically told me that, you know, he said, I'm kind of fearful of you. I don't particularly like you. Don't particularly like what you do, but I respect you. I said, hey, that's valuable for me.
Exactly.
That's all I'm asking, you know.
That's it, respect.
And to treat me like I'm a human being and I'm equal to you, you know. Those are my demands. You know, you have to have demands, and those are my demands.
Well, Dr. Alice Green, I appreciate you. Thank you for taking time out your busy schedule. You don't know how much this means to me to have you on my little small platform to come here and spread knowledge, give history, insight, speak truth. You know, I appreciate you so much. And again, people, please get this book, We Who Believe in Freedom, Activism and the Struggle for Social Justice. Again, this is a book about her life, so many things about there that I didn't know. I had no knowledge about or anything as it pertains to you yourself and the community in Albany and how Black people were and still being treated in Albany. So I thank you again. Make sure, again, a new book is out too. Outsiders, Growing Up Black in the Adirondacks. So you want to get that too, support. And, I'm just happy again that you allowed me to, just interview you. It definitely is a blessing, and I appreciate it. So
well, thank you, and it's a pleasure to have met both of you. So, so I always get something in return, and that's what I get.
Thank you. So, guys, thank you for watching the show. It's Just Different with Ty. Please make sure you like and subscribe. And peace and love. And again, thank you to the greatest activist alive right now. I'm giving you that title. You got it, all right? You got it. So, yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, thank you.